Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Coffee Chats with Ranjini and Vignesh. And today we are talking about career pivots, right? How do you go from A to B? So, one of the questions folks have is, oh, I want to get to that, right? I want to get to B. But getting to B means understanding where you are today. What is A in itself, right? I think that's something which people tend to miss. So we want to talk about how do you do a self-assessment, right, of where you are, which is point A. And it reminds me of this quote from Alice in Wonderland, right? Like one of my favorite books. If you don't know where you're going, any path can take you there. So you need to know where you are, and then you understand where you want to go, right? So yeah, there are five tools. This is exercises which I believe people can do themselves. So there are five tools which we would love to talk to you folks about. Um, and It assesses different aspects of individuals, right? Starting from your leadership to your character traits. So let's maybe get started. Vignesh, I'll start with a couple of them and you can add in over here as well, right? The first thing is a character survey. The ones which I have used is by Via Survey, VIA, Via Survey. They do have a free assessment tool in place as well. So what it does is it assesses your natural strengths, character strengths, right? And why do you need to do that? Character strengths are very individualistic, right? And they tend to stay common across time. Like, for example, love of learning is something which is top for me, right? And it stayed top for a really long time now. Now, that is important to know because if you were to pick up a role where that is not available, like learning is not available, probably I'm going to suffer because of that, right? I'm probably not going to do very well. So, identifying what your character strengths are really important. Highly recommend doing that, right? So that's one. The other thing I would recommend is around leadership. People want to move into leadership, right? So understanding what kind of leader you are is also very important. Why? It helps you position yourself better. It helps you work with your teams better. So, for example, are you a collaborator? Are you more of a champion? Are you a team player? Are you a dominant personality, right? Like people have different types of leaders. So, again, there are multiple frameworks around this. One thing I would recommend is MBTI, Myers Briggs, right, Vignesh? So, again, there are multiple tools around MBTI. So, do this. It gives you assessment in terms of what kind of person you generally tend to fall between, right? So, like, for example, mine follows, I think, falls somewhere between like a collaborator, a slightly dominant person. I think it's somewhere in between. So do that. It gives you a clear assessment of what kind of leadership style you generally have, right? So that's the second one. The third one, which is again very important, is assessing where you are today using a 360-degree feedback. Now, again, 360-degree feedbacks can happen in multiple ways. Request for a 360-degree feedback or a start, stop, continue kind of feedback from people you work with, right? It generally could be a manager, it could be a leader you work with but don't report to, it could be a peer in your ecosystem, it could also be someone from your team. Getting a 360-degree feedback helps you identify things which you probably have as blind spots. It's sometimes uncomfortable to do so, but would still recommend doing that, right? You rather know that earlier than not know it at all. So those are my three around. I think, like I said, leadership, where you are as a situation, and character strengths. Anything else, Vignesh, that you have?
My answers might be slightly very different from, I mean, she has given very action oriented sort of tests and uh, online stuff that you need to do. See, for me, again, pardon for the vague answer, sort of, but for me, the best decisions or best insights for me have come when I'm alone in a place. Best scenario would be just by a beach, staring at the waves and just thinking about the scenarios. Right? It sounds very vague, but trust me, what happens is sets a series of introspection within, by asking questions to myself. Right? Like, first thing is, like, am I happy in the current situation? Number one, like, that's the first baseline for me to start with happiness, right? Like, I start by evaluating, is there a need for change? What is my happiness level at this point in time, and then start looking at it from two dials. I'll start moving towards a personal and a professional scenario. And now obviously, like as you grow deeper into your career, these two become extremely critical, because it's like an infinite loop. I keep telling this to many people. It's like an infinite loop. What you do at office and professional world comes to your personal life. What you do, how well you do in your personal, takes back to your professional. And the more positive you keep doing this infinite loop, it's going to get better and better. So that's where I start. How do I get my baseline? Or yes, we can use a lot of tools where it tells you what's your strengths, what are your weaknesses. But for me, I would ideally sit and contemplate where my strengths are at this point in time, and what is my need to like pivot or move towards a different, yeah, domain or an area. So these are my triggers. The moment I get a trigger, I start putting a fishbone sort of a diagram, where I start looking at, okay, if I have to pivot to something, what are the pros and cons, and then I start building a mental map of what should be the next steps that I should keep taking. If there is a success, I keep moving towards that. If there is a failure, I then have a foolproof plan to come back and revisit what I have calibrated, right? So this is a mental map that I keep doing in on a, like, say, every 6 months sort of a exercise, where you take some time off, you just recalibrate. Yes, you did some changes in your life in the last 6 months. How has it affected that dials that I spoke about? Has it moved any of the critical elements? If the answer is yes, calibrate and see, are you in a much better state than what you were? If the answer is no, then again go back to the drawing board. And the last thing I leave is, I talk a lot with my the people who have led me when I was in 20s, right? Like I go back to my managers or my mentors who know me for almost 20 years now, and I keep asking them, like, how do you see me now? How? And some of them have been critical on both sides. Like when I really start slowing down, they're like, aren't you getting bored in your current position? Why are you just coasting in the current situation? And in some cases, I've seen my mentors come back and say, I think you're pushing too much, I think you're going all over the place. Why are you doing it? Slow down. So getting that perspective really helps. One is my own calibration of what I am doing, how I'm feeling, and B, it is going up outside and talking to people who really know me. Even if it is 5 people, 6 people, they know me for almost half of my career, right? So that's how I basically calibrate. I use definitely all the good things that Ranjini spoke about, but for me, these two elements give a lot of insight when I'm moving, trying to pivot or change something significantly. I'm
All
sure you're
right.
not going to like what I said, but
No,
yes.
there you have it. No, I think you could use a combination of them, right? You could use frameworks which exist. You could also do a lot of introspection, like Vignesh called out, right? I think reflection and introspection is always good. So maybe do both of that. And over a period of time, you would probably get to understand yourself better. For me, increasingly, I feel like self awareness is a superpower, and it takes intentional focus to get there, right? So, wishing that for all of you. Talk to you again in another episode of Coffee Chats. Take care. Bye bye.